Well, how many of you have developed something with Azure? Are you using Azure right now? Okay, I'm expecting this because it's very specific, this topic, and to platform as a service. And platform as a service, are you using that or just infrastructure as a service? Which one is using infrastructure as a service of you? So VMs, something like that. Okay, and platform as a service? Okay, there is one. Perfect. This session is about platform as a service and how to automate the creation of resources with the Azure management libraries and C#, okay, with code. Why? There are many ways to create stuff in Azure. We can use ARM templates, the JSON files. Okay, I don't like it so much because they are JSONs. Okay, so text files, you can change a double quote and then nothing works again. So, are to maintain, in my opinion, even if there are some tools that you can use to maintain them better, of course. So there are huge management instruments to do that. We can also use PowerShell, that is great, but under the hood, the PowerShell uses the .NET management libraries that I'm showing you today. Okay, so why don't use directly C#? We are developers. We want to bypass completely the IT guys while creating some resources. Not really, but it would be interesting, of course. And this is the purpose of this session. Okay, let's introduce this scenario. Scenario is this one. So I just create like this integration barrier to let you think about this automatic deployment system can be connected to something like a business environment. In the original session, I had a peer with a SharePoint site that in SharePoint wrote a new tenant, a new customer, and then SharePoint generates a message to the service bus. And I did the work to create stuff. So let's imagine that someone had the intent to create some new client, new tenant, and sends a message through a service bus. Then I receive this message in the code I'm writing now, and I perform some operation. Which operation? The scenario, the proposed scenario, is not a multi-tenant solution. So many companies works with software as a service, produces software as a service. I personally worked for a startup for years that has a product about e-commerce. Okay, it is a software as a service. But often they don't have a multi-tenant platform. It means that each client needs to redeploy the entire stack from the web app to the database, the storage, and so on. It's not really scalable. So you need to take this architecture and reduce the governance effort to reproduce the environment for each company, for each tenant you are managing. Okay. So in this scenario, we have the template of the database and the template of the application inside an Azure storage account. We get it, we get the two files, the two backups, and we create a new database. We create a new web app in app service, starting from that templates. In case of the web app, of course, is generic except the configuration. That the configuration should point to the newly created database, to and other stuff that is specific to the tenant, okay? We create the web application and deploy the code, deploy the settings, and we want also to map a custom DNS name, like name of the tenant dot mydomain dot something, okay? And also, let's create a new SSL certificate, so new custom certificate for that domain, all automatically. After that, to notify someone, okay, we send back an event to event grid that is different from service bus. I introduced event grid just to have more services in the demo, but it's not really useful. You can also use service bus to ping back entities too, but in my case, I would like to show you event grid to notify someone that I created all the stuff so they can proceed to something, to notify the user, to go in production, and so on. Okay? Good. Let's do it. This is the infrastructure. We have a SQL Server database in Azure. SQL Server is not really a server, it's just like a container of databases, so it's like a logical server. Inside this, we have an elastic pool. For whom don't know what elastic pool is, it's just like a virtual concept to pool many databases and pay just for the elastic pool. The pricing of SQL database is you have a database, you pay X. Okay? But if we have many databases and we are not using them so much, we can pool them into an elastic pool and pay just for the pool. So in that pool, we can have just one, or even, it's not really useful if you have one, but we can have 1 or 10 database or 100 database. Okay? And it saves money, of course, if the consume is not really high, of course. If one database grow up, you can also move out that database out of the pool and have a pricing dedicated for the database. So in this case, I want to create a new database inside this pool. Then I have an app service plan that is the, who followed my session of yesterday? Okay. I discussed yesterday what an app service plan is. It's just like a container of application, a web application. So one app service plan that defines a topology of machines in its size and dimension and in its number can host multiple applications. So in that case, the application of the yesterday demo and the application of today. Okay, each one is isolated from the others. So I will create a new web app inside here. I will configure the settings here to point to the specific database and to give a unique number that identifies the tenant. And I will also create where it is, okay, the certificate that is here from previous deployment and bind it to a real DNS name. This DNS name, I own the DNS that is also configured in Azure to work really in production, so to work with the authority. And finally, I notify back with this event grid that we'll see later. The application is just like a sample of Microsoft. I didn't remember when I took this, but it's just like a list of entries that comes from the DB. Okay, so let's write the code to do that. Well, let's write it in latest .NET Core version. We need some libraries to do that. So let's include the most important to do stuff with the management API, that is the Azure Fluent Management Library. This package wraps all the stuff to manage everything. So you can manage web apps, DNS, virtual machines, storage, search, everything. Okay? The good thing is the Fluent API. So I don't really remember, actually, this demo. But since it's Fluent, I can press dot and understand each pass step by step to create resources. Okay? This is a great feature in my opinion. Then we use JSON.NET, of course. We use Service Bus. Service Bus, okay. This one, okay. This is the old one, this is the new one. We use Event Grid. And we use another library that is very useful to create certificates with C#. How many of you know the Let's Encrypt, Acme Certificate Authority? Okay, it's just like, I understand that you probably are not the only soft developers, but when you fill the gap of IT by testing your application in some environment, we will see that there's many issues to solve. One is the certificate generation and management. When you deploy a web application to the real world, you must have SSL certificate, but SSL certificates expire. So you need to roll them, and you probably will roll them automatically because it's effort intensive and you can forget it to roll them. So this certificate authority, ECME, provides free certificate. That's also a step over, and it's very good. And the library to integrate it but in C# is called Certes here. Okay. Well, I think we are probably at a good point in terms of library. Probably I forget something, but no problem. Now, I need some boilerplate code to attach my code to the service bus for incoming messages. Since it's out of topic of this session, this code is like just copy and paste in this session, so please forgive me. I have the declaration of the subscription client to attach my code to a subscription. Just to let you know what I'm doing, this is Service Bus Explorer. This is the connection. And here we have this topic, it's called acquisition, where I send messages. Under this topic, there are some subscription, and my code is attaching to this subscription named Azure Provisioner. Okay? Just for instance, we can also take some messages here to see what's inside the messages. Each message is just like a simple JSON with request ID and tenant name. Okay, good. So we declare this. We have this main where we declare the subscription client, and we declare the registration of handlers that I'm not writing live now. I include some usings. Okay. Good. Good. And good. Okay. What is the flow here? Let's call the main async. Okay, I can do this definitely differently, but no problem. Which is, oh, I'm probably, okay. No, it's okay. Why? Oh. Okay, this one. So, to connect to the subscription client, I need some connection string and some settings. And to do all the stuff in this demo, I will need a huge amount of settings. So to avoid to read from an app settings, SQL Server, something like that, I want to include hard-coded that settings by introducing a models class with each kind of settings, like the name of SQL Server, the password, the resource group, where is the backup of the image, the connection string to the service bus, and so on. Okay, these settings, of course, should reside another place, like a configuration file, like somewhere secure, of course. It's too difficult for me to even also this one. This setting is very, very important because with this key, you can manage the stuff into Azure, into the Azure subscription itself, where here in Azure Active Directory, we create an app registration that is called CMakers. Those are the IDs. In the secrets, there's the secret you've seen in the configuration, and when you create this service identity, you will give it the permission to do stuff inside Azure subscription. How? You can go to a single resource group, the entire subscription, and you say, hey, give a role assignment to this service identity as a contributor for this resource that is the entire subscription. So the service identity can now operate on the subscription without a user identity. Good. So now what's missing? I think this can build. Okay. This can build too. It's missing just my code. Okay, so let's create the new class. Okay, and let's write the code here. Make it async. Okay. First step is to create the credential. So credential created by the SDK context factory from service principal, so not a user identity, but service identity, client ID, and client secret, tenant ID, and the Azure environment. What is Azure environment? We are accustomed to use many data centers, many regions, but when we use that region, we are using the public cloud, the global cloud. Also, Azure has some deployments, not really private, but dedicated deployments for government, for China, that's operated by another company. So here we are choosing this feature. So now we are using Azure Global Cloud. After that, we create the instance that manages all the stuff. The entry point is the class Azure of the Fluent API. We say authenticate through the credential, then authenticate. Okay, this is good. And we specify a subscription because, of course, an identity can handle multiple subscriptions, and it is okay. Now, let's create an ID just based on the datetime to identify this execution. Okay, let's give a breakpoint here. And now let's start to create stuff. First up, I want to create is the SQL database. So before creating the database, I want the reference to the server and the pool which I'm creating the database into. Okay, so the server is Azure. Give me the SQL servers, get by resource group. We also can have IDs, of course, but resource group is very useful and easy. So the resource group is here. Let's dig inside this configuration just to have a reference, okay? The resource group for the SQL is CMakers, and now I need to specify the name, SQL server, that is CMakers 2. Okay, then I need a pool, Azure SQL servers, database pools, no, pools, okay. Get by SQL server, because now we have the server. We need the name of the pool, that is CMakers basic. And now we can create a new DB. Okay, new DB, Azure. So you are just noticing probably there's a pattern. Get by something is the way to get information. To create new stuff, the pattern is define. Okay, so I define a new SQL server. I give the ID. Let's use the same convention as the stuff already deployed. So the SQL just T dash, okay, T dash the ID. And now I say define this new one with an existing SQL server into an existing elastic pool. And I say create. Okay, after this line that is synchronous code, the new database is created. So this line would stop the thread for 1 minute and 30 seconds. I don't know, actually. Depends also on the tier, the pricing tier, the database. More is the tier, short is the time. After that, I want to say, okay, the database is created, so import, restore the content from a backup. The backpack is here, DB image. So restore the content from this image. It's a backpack inside the storage account. But as you can see, it's just an URL. And if I pass this URL in the Internet Explorer, yeah, Internet Explorer. Okay. No, I'm not going to use the Internet Explorer in this demo. If I pass this URL in the browser, I get an authorized operation because it's private. So it's protected by a storage account key that I'm specifying here. Okay. And I need also to specify the SQL username and the SQL password. Opla. And to do stuff, so action that not creates anything or getting anything, but doing stuff, the pattern is execute. Okay? After this, the backup is restored. Okay, now we can create a web application. So, web app, Azure web apps dot define. Okay, here we need the name, of course, and the pattern I think is CM web. It's not really important, but just to have coherence to the other ones. Okay, probably is this one. And now I need to specify a plan or create a new one, but I want to use an existing plan. So before doing this, I get the plan. Azure, not web apps, app service plan, get by resource group. I have another resource group for the app service plan, and I have the name. The other resource group is demos, and the service plan is demos win, because it stands for Windows, okay, because we can also have plans in Linux. Okay, now I can say, okay, with existing Windows plan, with existing resource group, and now I can define all the stuff of the web application, settings, custom settings, flags, switches, and so on. So let's see. With app settings, it's very important to override the settings that are coming from the deployment with the new settings, for example, the new database that we created, so a new endpoint. So I will define new settings, not now, just at the end of this pipeline, just to not confuse your code, my code. Okay. So I want to disable the client affinity. What is the client affinity? Do you know what is client affinity? Sticky sessions. Okay, just few, but just two. It's very important that now in 2020 also, you will develop stuff that is stateless, okay? That it does not depend on the memory or the storage of the single machine. So something that uses session, for example, is bad. Because if you scale out, if you put another machine with the original one, the session is local to that machine. So if a client with a load balancer hits you and then the other machine, it's compromised. The situation is very compromised and the experience corrupted. So you need to externalize the state, and to enforce it, you need to disable client affinity in web app. Because if you don't do that, web app does a favor for you to implement automatically sticky session. What is a sticky session? You hit the load balancer for the first time. You don't have a cookie that says that you already comes into that balancer. You go to the first machine, and then the balancer sets you a cookie for subsequent request to go to the same machine. So it's just like a trick, a hack, to make things work even if you are not writing them to be stateless, okay? So please disable this and see how it's working in your deployment. Then I don't have documents, so new string here. I want HTTPS only, so every route that is HTTP will be redirected to HTTPS. I want without PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 100% PHP. I don't need it, so let's save some resources. I want 1 I want the platform architecture specification because my demo was built with 65 bits, so I need to specify the setting. Let's close this pane to have more space here. Okay. And now probably we don't have anything else to... Oh, always on. It's good. Always on tells the application to be always on. So when the application pull recycles, there's an automatic warm-up again to the application. OK, now the app settings. With app settings, the first key, we need a dictionary. Oh, we don't have dictionary here. Dictionary, OK, of strings. Whoa. Hey? No, ID. What do you do? Oh, OK. OK, the first thing is the tenant ID configuration. No. What I pressed now? OK. Hey, what are you doing now? Stop. Bad guy. OK. OK. The first is this tenant key, that's just tenant ID. The tenant ID is ID, what I created at runtime. And the DB connection key, that is database connection, can be the connection string, but this is general. OK, thank you. And I need to replace this placeholder with real values from this actual deployment. So I will replace this stuff with the ID, the SQL user, and the SQL password. Boom. Parentheses, and that's OK. OK. After this, I just created the web application, but it's empty. OK, it's empty and configure. I need to deploy stuff inside this. But before, after this, I have the name. So after this, I have my name, that is the IDT, cmwebT ID dot azurewebsite.net. OK. So I take that name. Web app. OK, now I'm just missing the magical word create. Web app, host name first. OK, there's no link. OK. And now I go to the DNS side. If I have a real DNS name to point, I can make the connection between my DNS and the Azure website's DNS. So I have a zone inside Azure. So let's take the zone. Let's get the zone, because it's already existent. We have a resource group just for the custom domain. The custom domain is demo.cloudmakers.xyz. And now another pattern that is update. So when we want to update an existing resource, we don't use a define, we don't use the execute pattern, we use the update one. So get and update then. In this case, I want to define a new CNAME record that is pointing, the name ID, that is pointing to the host with custom TTL. TTL is very, very important. So just a brief parenthesis on TTL. What is TTL? In DNS service, when you are involved into DevOps operation, deployment stuff, production environment, I work with e-commerce. So in e-commerce, when you are offline for more than 30 seconds, it's a problem. Often you need to move deployments to another region, another place, because of maintenance, it's normal. And if you are using DNS with long TTLs, and you need to change this DNS records, you will be affected by a lag, a delay, the traditional propagation time of DNS. Okay, so keep in mind that you keep the TTL value very short, like a minute, a second, maybe, not for production, not for a long time, of course, a second, but if you reduce this TTL to a second and then you switch this TTL, all the servers in the globe are affected in near real time. So the TTL value is very, very important. Then when we make an update, we use the pattern update, then attach apply. Now we have the real DNS. So we come back to the web application, and we see, hey, update, define a host name binding with third-party domain that is ID. Sorry, that is the custom domain with the subdomain ID. DNS record type, we create a CNAME record, which is the different one, is pointing to another name. The A record is pointing to an IP. I prefer to use always names because IP can change, so it's better to use real names. Attach, yep, and apply, also this. Okay. Now I can deploy, or I can generate a certificate. I can generate a certificate because I can validate the domain ownership with the DNS I own, so I can do this automatically. But to do this, certificate, I use an Acme Utils class that I don't want to write it right now. So let's pass it. Acme Utils. Okay. Let's see in the details. So it takes the domain, the DNS of Azure, Management Fluent Libraries, etc. It uses this Acme context that is of the library certus. Some hard-coded settings, like the account name, it's not really an issue. And it initiates an order. Okay. After this initialization, we need to verify the challenge that they give to me to a real DNS. So this is the challenge. I update the DNS to create the DNS record just for the challenge. And then I call the validate that makes the Let's Encrypt authority to check if there is a proper validation in my domain. After some attempts, about 2 attempts, if everything is okay, I can generate the certificate. And I can write the PFX of this certificate with the password specified in configuration, and I return the bytes, the path to that PFX and the password. Okay. So here I can say, hey. Okay. What is the problem here? Oh, there's no class. Right. There's no class. Public class Acme Utils. Okay. Okay, that's better, probably. Yeah. So, subdomain is ID, domain is custom domain, and the DNS zone is DNS. If a certificate has value, okay, this is awaitable, as value, then I map the custom certificate. So web app, update again. Now let's define SSL binding for the host name ID dot demo cloud makers XYZ, that is our custom domain, with the PFX certificate to upload. Okay, it wants the PFX path file that is certificates. It's returning a tuple, so value dot item 1, and the password certificate value dot item 2. Okay. Now I can choose the typology of binding. Okay, IP-based binding means that we need to spawn a new IP for each certificate because of the protocol. I don't have the time to inspect this kind of feature, but we use SNI, that is the new negotiation for certificate for the last 5-6 years. That is free and it works like charm. Okay, and now attach and apply. Okay. Should work. Now we're ready to deploy. Okay. So deploy is web app action. So deploy what? A package URI. This zip file, this archive can reside everywhere. In our case, it resides to the Azure storage, but with shared access signature. So what is a shared access signature? Since this resource is protected, I can generate this long URL that integrates a signature to share this URL with you, the world. Okay. So in this case, I use that strategy. I also specify to delete everything it finds in the actual deployment, and then execute. Okay. Now, if the deployment is complete, then I will notify back the event grid, okay, with this code. So we deploy correctly. I create a new event grid client. I don't live code this because it's just tricky. It's not really valuable to live code this. Okay. So create a client, a publish events. This schema, event grid event, is not mine, just a standard of event grid. Okay, so these are standard properties, and this can be a bag when you define your custom model. In this case, my data model is just a model containing an URL. Okay, it's ready. Now let's look at in production. Oh, blah. Ambiguous, yeah. Stop. Probably I made a mistake here. Okay, good. We already have some messages here, so I'm expecting that the breakpoint will eat automatically. Okay, this line. So I authenticate, I get this ID. It will be very useful later. Okay. And then I leave the process, just a quick look if everything is okay. Server pool. It's a very long flow, so if just one thing is not good, all the flow broke. It seems it is okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's go. I just make a breakpoint here. Okay, so let's do a recap. In the meantime, we have an incoming notification, okay, here. We parse the message to the root object, request ID and tenant name. It's useless just to have a reference back, to notify back the event grid. We get from the storage the database image, and we restore it into a new created database inside an existing pool. Okay. After that, we create a web application, and we define settings to point to the new database. We get the created DNS name, azurewebsite.net, to map it to a real DNS. And after this, we can create the SSL that is missing in the slide. I'm sorry. After that, we deploy the web code, and it will be probably enough. Okay, let's see. This is the situation before the code. So we had around 5 databases. I'm expecting the 6th one now. Okay, this one. I don't know if now it's already full of tables. Yes, they have. Okay. Those are just sample blocks. We can say .netfest.com. Okay. So it is probably creating the web application. Let's see. The web application with ID 618. 618 here. Oh, it has already mapped the custom domain and also the certificate already created. And also the settings, HTTPS only, so also the configuration. Here. Great. So what's missing? Probably it's been evolving into the deployment part right now. So I'm expecting that it will hit this breakpoint in a minute, 30 seconds. So we can, I can tell you a joke in the meantime. Well, a question to, please. Thank you. Excuse me.
If you build such a pipeline in your production environment, some things may not work at specific stage, and you should clean after
all the stuff.
So you, in real production environment, you have some additional code to clean up in case of failure of some step in the middle.
Yeah. This is the good question, okay? What to do in production environment if some of the steps of this pipeline fail, okay? It's a common issue for everyone. If you have an IRM template, or even the, especially also the creation process of the Azure portal, when you create with the wizard some resources, it can block to in the middle part. So you just need to implement this by yourself. In our case, we use messaging. We use queues, okay? So queues with the operation, and we orchestrate them in just one scenario. Because in the other scenarios, 99%, there's no problem of provisioning. But in one scenario that is really difficult to set up all the stuff, we use messaging to the couple system, retry, and then eventually roll back what is being created and it's useless. Okay,
thank you.
In the meantime, other question after. In the meantime, it completed, so probably this works with the custom DNS, with the custom certificate, with the record I updated on the database. I'm waiting just for the warm-up. Now the last missing part is just the notification back to event grid. Okay, event grid is defined here. Where is it? They changed the portal like yesterday. Okay. Event grid has this URL, this endpoint, and below this we can have multiple subscription. A subscription is a notification endpoint. Okay, a webhook, a storage queue, a custom hook, a custom point with an hybrid connection. So we can say, hey, when someone writes to that topic, forward the event to my webhook, or my storage queue, or my service bus queue. I can select the endpoint in a storage account, and then I can also have filters, just the messages with that subject, with that event type, and so on. I already created a notification channel that is pointing to this storage account, CMakers, queues, notification, here. So I'm expecting now to see something here that gives me all the stuff in the schema, also the custom URL in the data part. So I can use this URL or other information back to fill the data in a CRM, in something like that, to decouple my provisioning system to the business system. Okay. This is enough. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here for your question for other 10 minutes and so on, no problem. Thank you. Here you are.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
What do you think about, Azure now have probably daily or weekly new preview features.
Okay.
And what about these libraries related to preview features? What is refreshing sequence? What is in reality? What is possible? What is impossible?
Yeah. In the past, they weren't so fast, but now they are really fast to align the libraries to the preview features and to new services in Azure. If you include the pre-release flag here in NuGet, you will see okay, not this one, but there are probably some, okay, probably there's no pre-release now. Oh, October 25. Okay, it's quite updated. Okay, as you see, but they continuously roll out a preview libraries version with new stuff, so you can really do almost anything with this library. But this is because they use that for all the stuff, PowerShell and so on. So they have the direct interest to make them aligned with the latest things. Yeah, sure. Also, I didn't say that the good point to use C# in that library is that the code, when you update, can break. Okay, this is a great thing, a great stuff. Okay, if your code breaks, you should fix it, and you will align to the new feature, the new version. With the ARM templates, it doesn't break. It's JSON. Okay. It breaks in production when you deploy that code, okay? But here it's strongly typed and it's safe at compile time. In my opinion, it's good. Okay, thank you for the question. Other questions?
Any more?
Okay.
So in your production, do you usually create a separate resource groups for your tenants, or do you have them all in one resource group? Because I'm interested in case maybe a client wants some access to their resources on Azure. So how do you handle that?
Okay. Well, it depends. In a company where I run the product, I decided the topology. Okay, so the topology I decided is by area. Storage in a storage resource group, DNS in the DNS resource group, web in another resource group. Also because app service is tricky around the resource group, because if you put two web apps in different resource group, not web apps, two app service plan into different resource group, you can move and hot swap between the two web apps. So you can move the web app one into the other plan. This is tricky, this is less documented, but it's how it works. But in your case, when you have your clients accessing a shared subscription, I think, the best thing to do is to isolate the resource group, of course, because of the airbag permissions set. So I will definitely suggest you to segregate the environments at the cost of some missing feature. For example, this I mentioned about app service plan. If you segregate company A from company B in terms of app service plan, you will never able to move a web app from the two environments. But of course, if you have a storage account that is under the resource group company A, you can move this into the other resource group at any time. My suggestion to use that approach is to have the configuration, you can have the configuration somewhere where you can change also the structure in time. So don't fix it to a single template, to a single path, but just be fluent also in a way you define the configuration step. Sure, but they are guidelines. Okay, he said that Microsoft has guidelines and recommendation for this kind of definition, topology, and so on. But it depends of your environment. So guidelines are guidelines. So it really depends. You can also have everything in one resource group and tag it with tags. That is useful and it's great. And nobody will hurt you if you do that. Okay. Other questions? Okay.
Thank you for your speech.
You too.
And I have a question about does that approach work for virtual machines with some external tools like, I don't know, Kafka, Elasticsearch, and do you have possibility to configure them?
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned before that in one case we had some messaging workflow because it was complex and so on. It's that case. For virtual machine, when we need to ensure that the environment are installed, we, for example, deploy a virtual machine with an image, then apply a DSC, that's a desired state configuration, and that will perform some steps that are out of the Azure control because they are custom. So here, the flow is very simple because every single call is in the Azure control. So they are Azure resources that have been provisioning. But when you are dealing with virtual machine and you connect into the virtual machine with agent, with DSC, with something like that, the virtual machine performs some action. It's not, yes, it's predictable, but not so predictable as this flow you saw. So in that case, yes, you can do, of course, it, but you will probably need some messaging technology, something to be resilient and safe and robust, and to roll back in case there's some missing pieces. Okay?
Thank you.
No problem.
You mentioned RM templates. I have a question. Have you considered to use Terraform? And why didn't you choose Terraform?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is a great valid approach. In my first slide, there was Ansible, but also Terraform. Terraform is good also because it decouples it actually from the Azure logic, so it's like plug-in feature. So yes, it's a great way to do this. Probably my suggestion is to say C# management libraries are really good because they compile, and probably compared to ARM, to direct method, to PowerShell scripting, probably can be better. But of course, they are huge instruments like Terraform, Ansible, they are great, and you should use them because this not really scale, but that approach will scale.
Thanks.
Okay. Sure, no problem.
Any more?
Some additional questions also about versions. 1 week ago, I found some issue. I'm usually add templates for these jobs here, and I see what version of the API I'm using. My template is more newest of version what used in some location in data center of Azure. And what is this library? I understood what this coding way, infrastructure as code by this way. It's possible to use, for example, installation, new environment, blah, blah. But what about version if we have situation we use Nevis library, but have the same issue with some data center what is not support the latest version of library. It is problematic for this case or not?
Okay, I digged, but not recently, 1 year ago, inside the library because they're open. And they deal with that kind of version problem with different regions and so on. But I'm not really sure of the status of this scenario. I will need to check it because I don't know now. I do not have this problem because fortunately I'm using me and the company I follow the most up-to-date data centers that are Western Europe, for example, also North Europe is okay. So the region that are up-to-date, okay, but I will need to check it, actually.
Okay, it's West US data center.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And maybe the last? Nope.
Okay.
So thank you very much,
Thank
Roberto.
you again. Thank you for the question. Thank you.